All right, the Chapter 3 test will come in two different parts. The first part, which we will take tomorrow, will deal with no graphing calculator. You may have a regular type of calculator, but not a graphing one. And in that part, you will write the explicit formula for some sequence. You're going to solve some systems of equations using whichever method you prefer. The elimination method or the substitution method would be the two of choice for this part, since you will not have your calculator. And then you'll have to graph some lines and find equations of a line that are parallel and perpendicular to that line. And then you'll have some questions from previous material, like the first chapter that we had and things from last year or the year before. Then the second day's test, which you will get to use your graphing calculator on, you will have to solve some systems of equations. Again, here you can use your calculator to find those solutions, either with the table or with a graph. You'll have to figure out the line of best fit for some things and then answer some questions concerning that. And then again, you'll have some questions from previous material. So let's look at some examples of things. These first examples will be over what's going to be on tomorrow's test, writing the explicit formula for an equation. And so here we have u sub 1 equals 18 and u sub n equals u sub n minus 1 plus 3. So that means it's going from 18 to 21 to 24 to 27 and so on and so forth. This is the first term. So in order to write our explicit formula, we know that it's going up 3 each time, which that means the slope is 3. And so our equation is going to be y equals 3x plus, now because this is u sub 1, we do not want to put plus 18 here. We have to figure out where it crosses the y-axis, because 1 is up at 18 and 2 is up at 21. And so we have to find this term, which is 0, comma 15. And that would be the explicit formula. Now then, if they ask, the question asks then after that, what is the 34th term, then you would substitute 34 into that and figure out the answer, which 34 times 3 is 102 plus 15, which then turns into 117. And then the other thing is if this were u sub 0, now your equation would be y equals 3x plus 18, because now you do have the 0 term. Just understand the differences between the two. And I think with this question, instead of saying maybe u sub 34 is the one you'd figure out, either way, you just have to substitute it in and come up with an answer. And so that is writing the explicit formula. Then solving equations, like I said, you can do this either through substitution or elimination. With this one, we are going to use the substitution process, and we are going to take that equation first. No, not that one. We're going to take the bottom equation first. That one, and we are going to solve for y. So to get y by itself, we will first subtract 3x from both sides. So you get 2y equals a negative 3x minus 5. Then we would have to divide by 2 to get y equals a positive 3 halves x plus 5 halves. And now that we have y solved in the second equation, we are going to take this and substitute it into the first equation for y. And so you will have 2x minus 7 times 3 halves x plus 5 halves equals 24. And now I see I've made a mistake because we don't divide by a negative 2 here. It's supposed to be a positive 2. So therefore this should be a negative 3 and a negative 5 halves, which now is going to change our equation over here to a negative 3 minus 5 halves. Hopefully you caught that little mistake earlier and were wondering what the heck I was doing. Now that we have this correct, we can move on. Distributing the negative 7 to both of those two things, it is going to be 2x minus or plus 21 over 2x plus 35 over 2 equals 24, because we're taking a negative times a negative in both cases. Combining these two things, that would be like 4 halves, and 4 halves plus 21 halves is 25 halves x. We're going to subtract 35 halves from this side, and you will get 13 over 2. And the reason you get 13 over 2 is because in halves, 24 is going to be 48 halves. And 48 minus 35 is 13. And then finally, you would multiply by 2 over 25 to both sides. And x will equal 13 25ths. And if you had to go decimal on it, that would be 0.52. And it would be exactly 0.52. And now that we have that answer, then we can substitute this answer into any one of our equations, this, that, or that one, actually this one down here, to come up with our other answer. And we are going to use this blue one here, so y equals a negative 3 halves times 13 over 25 minus 5 halves. Multiplying this out, that would become a negative 39 over 50 minus 5 halves. And then combining these two things, common denominator is going to be 50. So 5 halves is going to be 125 over 50. And so then a negative 39 and a negative 125 is going to be a negative 164 over 50, which can simplify to a negative 82 over 25. And so then that is what your y value will equal. That's a negative 3.28 if you go decimal on it. And so y is equal to negative 282 over 25, and x is equal 13 over 25. And there you've solved it using the substitution method. Moving on to the next one. Because this is a positive 3y and that is a negative 3y, I'm going to do this one through the addition method or the elimination method, and those are already opposites of each other, so I don't have to multiply by anything. And so then I just need to add things together to get 7x equals 31. Divide both sides by 7, and x equals 31 over 7. Then taking this and substituting it into either one of the equations, and I'm just going to use the top one. And when you distribute, that will become 155 over 7 plus 3y equals 24. Subtracting 155 over 7 from both sides. You will get 13 over 7. Because common denominator is 7, and then 7 times 24 is 148. Is that right? We have to change that. It is 168. Because 4 times 7 is 28, and you carry the 2, and then 14 plus 2 is 16. There, that makes more sense. And 168 minus 155 is 13. And then finally, multiply both sides by 1/3. Same as dividing by 3. And so then you will get y is equal to 13 over 21. And so x is 31 over 7. Y is 13 over 21. Now remember that if you get an equation where both x's and y's, all the variables go away, that means there's no solution, and then you would, or there's no solution or infinite solutions, and then if you get an equation where it's like 3 equals 3, if that is true, then it's infinite solutions. If you get something like 3 equals 5, that is not true, then that would be no solution. That can happen also. This means the lines are parallel. This means they are the same line. Now then, asking to write an equation that, or first graph this. In order to graph, the easiest thing to do is solve for y. So you subtract 2x first. You get 3y equals a negative 2x plus 18. Then divide by 3. And y is equal to a negative 2/3 x plus 6. And so we would go up to 6 on our y-axis because of the y-intercept. And since our slope is a negative 2/3, we down 2 and to the right 3. And we just continue that pattern forever. And up 2 and to the left 3. Because it is a negative slope, it has to go down and to the right. And there is our line. Now then, here, we want to make a line parallel at a negative 6, 5. So negative 6, 5, which means we have to go down and to the right like so. So it's going to be this. Now, just drawing it is no big deal, but we want to find the equation. We know that our slope is a negative 2/3, and if it's parallel, it has to have the same slope. So then you can write 5 equals a negative 2/3 times negative 6 plus b. And then we solve for b. Negative 2/3 times a negative 6 is a positive 4 plus b. And then we subtract 4. And b equals 1. And so then our equation that is parallel through negative 6, 5 is going to be y equals negative 2/3 x plus 1. And that stands to reason if you 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And there it is. And then trying to make one perpendicular at a negative 6, 5. Perpendicular, you have to use the opposite reciprocal for a slope. So it has to be a positive 3/2. And then using those two coordinates, 5 would equal a positive 3/2 times a negative 6 plus b. Multiplying these two together, and that would be a negative 9 plus b equals 5. Adding 9, and b would equal 14. So our equation that is perpendicular is going to be y equals 3/2 x plus 14. That would be the line that goes here. Right there, and that is a right angle. And there's how you write a parallel on a perpendicular line. And that would be the conclusion of everything for the first test. Now on the second test, you'll have some of the same similar things, and then you'll also have to do some things where you have to find the solution, and you can use your graphing calculator. So when you're going to use your graphing calculator, the first thing you need to do, take each equation and solve for y. The beginning one, first going to subtract 4x, then divide by 7, and y will equal a negative 4/7 x plus 24 over 7. Second equation, same thing. Subtract 2x, and you'll get a negative 3y equals a negative 2x minus 16. Then divide by a negative 3, and y will equal 2/3 x plus 16/3. You don't have to do any of the math if you don't want to. You can just leave it like that. And so now that we have these two equations, now would be the time to pull out your calculator, go into the y equals part of your calculator, and enter the two equations. Doesn't matter which one you enter first. 2/3 x plus 16/3. And then we have negative 4/7 x plus 24/7. Make sure that when you do this part, you do not need any of your stats plot on. If you have this type of a calculator, to turn them off, you just go into your second stat plot, hit number 4, and be done with it. And then you can graph. And hopefully you'll see the intersection point when you initially graph. If that is not the case, those of you with a TI, go to Zoom and try Zoom Fit. I think it is. Yes, Zoom Fit. And that will show you a good viewing window to fit those two in there. On a Casio, you would hit second or the zoom button also, and yours would be Zoom Auto. Now that we have the intersection point, we can find that. On a TI, you hit calculate, intersect. First curve, second curve, take your guess if you want, and there you have the solution. X is a negative 1.35. And y is 4.307. So if this is your answer, you'd say x is approximately equal to a negative 1.538, and y is approximately equal to 4.308, because you would round to 3 places would be good. And then you would be done with that question. If you wanted to use a table, you could, but you wouldn't have to. And then finally, the other thing that you will have to do, you'll have a couple of equations where you're going to find the line of best fit and all of that good stuff. So, given these years, 1990, 2000, 2010, 2020, and this is all made up stuff, but just as a practice. And this is the number in millions of color TVs that are not flat screens. I know it's hard to imagine a TV that's not a flat screen anymore, but there are some out there. So here, you would have to enter your data to find the line of best fit. On the Casio, you would go to your menu and go over to Stat and fill in your 2 lists. On the TI, you would hit your Stat button, go to Edit, and then remember, hit Clear if you have lists already in there. And then once you have your data all done, those of you with a Casio, you can just draw it. Those of you with a TI, you have to go into Stat Plot and turn number 1 on. And then you can graph. And now it's going to graph those 2 lines that we had from that previous question because we still have those in the y equals part. If you don't want those in there, just get rid of them. Casios, you don't have that problem. There. Now that you have it graphed, Casios, yours will automatically zoom to what you need. TIs, you have to hit the zoom button and number 9. And there are 4 points. Now then you would want to calculate the line of best fit and then be able to transfer that into somewhere. So Casio, down at the bottom, you have to hit the calc button and then choose the X and you will get your equation. For those of you with a TI, you hit Stat, go over to Calc, and then you want to choose number 4, Lin Reg. Now those of you that have a newer version of this, remember you have list 1, list 2, and then you'll have store regression equation, and you want to store it in Y1. To get it into that Y1, to get that Y1 to appear, you hit your vars button, go to yvars, function, and there's Y1. Then once you get that, you can calculate it. Those of you with an older version of a TI where you just have, like I do, you have to go in and calculate it. It will give you this equation. And so then you can write your answer on your piece of paper. Your equation would be y equals negative 0.212x plus 428.01. And remember now this is the slope, which means every year the number of non-flat screen TVs goes down by 0.212 million TVs because this is in millions. And the y-intercept would be in the year 0, there would be 428 million TVs. Like I said, this isn't a realistic thing. It's more about getting the equation and then being able to answer some questions. Now then, those of you with the Casio, you would want to push the copy button so that you could get it over to this part, hit your enter, and it will copy it in. Those of you with a TI, if you don't have the new version where it already automatically copies it in, you have to go into here, y equals, hit your vars button, go down to number 5, statistics, over to EQ, and number 1, the regression equation, and then it will put that in there, and there is your line. Now then, some questions that could be asked after that would be, what happens in 2015? And so for that, Casio people, after you graph this, you would shift G-solve and do a y-cal and put 2015 in for X. TIs, you would push second calc. Value is the one you want, and now you would put 2015 in. And you would get 0.83. And so that's 0.83 million TVs. And because this is between the beginning and the ending of the data we were given, this would be considered interpolation. Now then, it could ask another question, is what happens in 2040? And so then again, you would have to go into your calculator. Casio would G-solve y-cal again, TI calc value, and then put in 2040. And if you get the invalid thing, that means you do not have a big enough viewing window. So you're going to have to adjust the viewing window. Because right now we only go to 2023, so 2050 would be good. Then regraph. But because 2050 is right here, right there, we do not have enough of this shown. So we have to zoom, and zoom fit would be good. There we have it now. Now we can do our calculation of a value and put in 2040. And it's a negative 4.47, which can't happen, so then there would be no TVs that weren't flat screen anymore. And this value, again, this would be in millions. And this would be extrapolation because it is outside of the range of values you were given. Another question that could be asked would be, what year were 2.5 million TVs? And so for this one, on a Casio, you would do the same thing. Second G-solve, and now you would do an X-cal, and then it would ask you what the Y value is, which is 2.5, and then you'd push enter, and it will show you the value. TI people, you have to go about it a different way, in that you need to put in 2.5 as a second equation, then graph the two, and then find the intersection point. So second calc, number 5, and we have a 1 line, second line, and we don't need a guess. And so it's 2007 would be the answer. And there will be a couple of questions like that on the test where you have to use your calculator to come up with the line of best fit and all of that good stuff. And then, like I said, in both tests, you will have some other questions where they'll be from previous material, things from the first test, things from geometry, maybe even some things from algebra. And some of this stuff that we're doing here is from algebra as well. And that concludes our review for the Chapter 3 test. So we will start that tomorrow with the no graphing calculator part first.